The sound of metal hitting stone echoed through the grand Senate chamber as Commander Kethvorin walked toward the speaking platform. His mechanical leg made a clicking noise with every step. The senators watched him with a mix of curiosity and disgust. He was not the proud warrior he had once been. Now he was something broken, something that reminded them of failure. Kethvorin had once commanded the 7th Fleet. He had won 12 major battles. His name had been spoken with respect across 40,000 star systems. But that was before the incident. Before the humans. Now, 3 of his limbs were cheap metal replacements. One of his eye sockets was empty and covered with scar tissue. Burn marks covered the left side of his body. No healing tank could fix what had been done to him. The doctors said his wounds were not just physical. They said his mind had been damaged too. The senators did not believe his reports. That was why he was here today. They wanted him to explain himself. They wanted him to admit that he had exaggerated. They wanted him to say that a species from a small blue planet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy was not actually dangerous. He reached the platform and looked up at the hundreds of faces staring down at him. High Admiral Zorvac sat in the center, his golden uniform shining under the lights. Senator Ithmira was beside him, her thin fingers tapping impatiently on her desk. They had already made up their minds. Kethvorin knew this, but he had to try. "Tell us again," Zorvac said, his voice dripping with boredom. "Tell us about these terrifying humans." Some of the senators laughed. Kethvorin did not react. He had heard the jokes. He had heard them call him a coward. He had heard them say that he had lost his mind along with his limbs. 2 years ago, Kethvorin began, my scout fleet found a damaged ship drifting near the Kelzari border. It was a colony vessel. Primitive technology. No weapons we could detect. We moved to capture it. Yes, Ithmira interrupted. "We have read your report. Get to the point." Kethvorin took a slow breath. There were 47 soldiers on that ship. Just 47. They wore simple armor. They carried basic projectile weapons. When we attempted to board their vessel, they counterattacked. They boarded my flagship instead. The chamber was quiet now. Even the senators who had been laughing were listening. My flagship had 12,000 crew members, Kethvorin continued. Trained warriors. The best in the fleet. The humans killed most of them in 6 hours. Zorvac leaned forward. "You expect us to believe that 47 primitives defeated 12,000 of our soldiers?" "I expect you to listen," Kethvorin said. His voice was harder now. "I watched them fight. They did not stop when they were wounded. They did not slow down when they were bleeding. One of them took a plasma shot to the chest and kept fighting for another 10 minutes before he finally fell. And even then, he used his last breath to detonate an explosive device. He took an entire deck with him." The senators shifted in their seats. This was not what they wanted to hear. "They learned our weapons in minutes," Kethvorin said. "They picked up our rifles and figured out how to use them while still under fire. They turned our own technology against us. They set traps using materials from our own ship. They worked together without any telepathic link, without any hive connection. They used hand signals. They used their eyes. They trusted each other completely." He paused, remembering. The memories came back every night. The screams of his crew. The sound of human laughter echoing through smoke-filled corridors. The last human he had seen, a female with both legs blown off, dragging herself through the halls with a knife in her teeth. She had killed 14 more Valorians before someone finally stopped her. "They did not surrender," Kethvorin said quietly. "Not one of them. They fought until their bodies could not move anymore. And some of them kept fighting even after that." Zorvac waved his hand dismissively. "You were caught off guard. Your crew was unprepared. This does not mean the species is a threat to the Empire. You are not listening, Kethvorin said. I have fought the Krullian Horde. I have faced the Silicon mines of Nexus 7. I have battled enemies that exist as pure energy. None of them frighten me the way those humans did. The Krullians fight for territory. The Silicon mines fight for resources. The humans fought because they refused to lose. There is a difference. Senator Ithmira looked at him with pity in her eyes. Commander, you suffered a great trauma. It is understandable that your perception has been affected. Perhaps some time in a rest facility would help you recover. Kethvorin felt anger rising in his chest. You are planning to invade their homeworld. I have seen the fleet preparations. 500 ships. 2 million soldiers. You think that will be enough? It will be more than enough, Zorvax said confidently. We have conquered species that breathe plasma. We have defeated beings made of living crystal. We have absorbed hive minds that span entire planets. What threat could soft, short-lived mammals pose to the Valorian Empire? Kethvorin looked at the High Admiral for a long moment. He saw the arrogance in those eyes. The complete certainty. The same certainty he had felt before his fleet was destroyed. I have said what I came to say, Kethvorin said finally. My conscience is clear. When your invasion fleet is burning, remember that you were warned. 2 guards stepped forward to escort him out. Kethvorin did not resist. He had done everything he could. The rest was up to fate God as he walked through the massive doors of the Senate chamber. He heard Zorvax's voice behind him. File his testimony under unreliable sources. The invasion will proceed as planned. Kethvorin stepped out into the cold night air of the capital city. Above him, the stars stretched across the sky. Somewhere out there, on a small blue planet, the humans were living their lives. They had families. They had children. They had no idea that an invasion fleet was being assembled to destroy everything they had built. But Kethvorin knew something the Senate did not. Those humans would not go quietly. They would not surrender. They would fight with everything they had, and they would make the Empire pay for every inch of ground. He looked up at the stars and whispered into the darkness. You fools! You have no idea what you are about to awaken. And when you finally understand, it will be far too late. Somewhere in the shipyards, construction continued on the invasion fleet. Officers celebrated their upcoming victory. Soldiers prepared for what they believed would be an easy conquest. None of them knew that they were preparing for their own destruction. The war had not yet begun, but the ending had already been written. 6 months later, the invasion fleet entered the Sol system. High Admiral Zorvax stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the small yellow star grow larger on the view screen. Behind him stretched 500 warships, each one carrying thousands of soldiers. 2 million warriors in total, ready to add another species to the Empire's long list of conquests. The tactical officers had completed their scans of the system. The results made Zorvax smile. The humans had primitive technology, nuclear power, chemical rockets, basic artificial intelligence. They had barely colonized their own moon and had a small outpost on the red planet nearby. This would not be a war. This would be a harvest. Open a channel to their planet, Zorvax ordered. Standard subjugation broadcast. The communications officer obeyed. Within seconds, the message was traveling toward Earth at the speed of light. It was the same message the Empire had sent to hundreds of species before. Surrender immediately. Disarm all military forces. Accept integration into the Valorian Empire as a labor species. Resistance would result in complete annihilation. Zorvax expected panic. He expected pleading. He expected desperate attempts to negotiate. What he received was silence. For nearly an hour, There was no response. The bridge crew shifted nervously. This was unusual. Most species responded within minutes, either with surrender or with desperate threats. But the humans said nothing. Then the view screen flickered. A human female appeared on the screen. She wore a simple military uniform with symbol Zorvax did not recognize. Her face was calm. Her eyes were cold. She did not look like someone who was about to lose everything. "You have entered sovereign human space," she said. Her voice was flat and steady. "You have 24 hours to withdraw your forces. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Zorvax stared at the blank screen for a moment. Then he began to laugh. His officers joined him, and soon the bridge was filled with the sound of their amusement. A warning? From a species that had not even left its own solar system. The arrogance was almost admirable. "Continue toward the planet," Zorvax ordered. "We will establish a forward base on their moon first." The fleet moved deeper into the system. The human moon grew larger on the screens. It was a gray, dead rock with no atmosphere. Perfect for a military installation. Scans showed some human structures on the surface, but nothing that posed a threat. The first ships entered orbit around the moon. The surface exploded. Zorvax watched in shock as hidden weapons emerged from beneath the gray dust. Railguns that should not exist at this technological level. Energy weapons that the humans should not have been able to build. Missile batteries that had been invisible to every scan. 47 ships were destroyed in the first minute. The fleet scattered, trying to escape the kill zone. But the weapons kept firing. Ship after ship erupted into flame. Debris filled the space around the moon. The screams of dying crews filled the communication channels. "Return fire!" Zorvax shouted. "Destroy those weapons!" The fleet obeyed, pouring energy into the lunar surface. Explosions tore across the gray rock. Dust clouds rose and fell in the airless environment. But the human weapons were deeply buried, protected by layers of rock and metal. For every battery, the Valorians destroyed. 3 more seemed to activate Dot. It took 2 hours for the fleet to silence the moon. By then, 89 ships had been lost. Nearly 200,000 Valorians were dead. Zorvax stared at the tactical display, unable to believe what he was seeing. No species had ever inflicted such losses on a Valorian invasion fleet. Not in the first engagement. Not ever. "Admiral," the communications officer said, his voice shaking. "We are intercepting human transmissions." Put them on speaker. The bridge filled with human voices. They were calm and professional, speaking in clipped military code. Zorvax listened, trying to understand what he was hearing. "Target 17 confirmed destroyed. Moving to secondary positions. Enemy formation breaking up as predicted. Keep the pressure on." They are doing exactly what we expected. They were not panicking. They were not mourning their dead. They were keeping score. They had assigned numbers to his ships and were tracking which ones they had killed. A Bolsh. Cold feelings spread through Zorvax's chest. For the first time, he wondered if Kethvorn had been right. He pushed the thought away. This changed nothing. The humans had been clever. Yes. They had prepared defenses. But the fleet still had over 400 ships. They still had nearly 2 million soldiers. This was a setback, not a defeat. "We will bypass the moon," Zorvax announced. "Begin landing operations on the planet's surface. Target this location." He pointed to a city on the tactical map. Intelligence suggested it was a minor population center, far from the humans' main military forces. An easy target to establish a foothold. 50,000 shock troops descended toward the city of Kyiv. The landing went smoothly at first. The drop pods hit the ground without resistance. The soldiers emerged, forming into units. preparing to sweep through the city and capture the population. But the city was empty. The streets were silent. The buildings were abandoned. There were no civilians, no panicked crowds, no one to capture or subdue. Just empty streets and cold wind dot. Then the first shots rang out. They came from everywhere at once. From windows and rooftops. From underground tunnels and hidden bunkers. The humans had evacuated their civilians and turned the entire city into a trap. The Valorian soldiers found themselves in a maze of death, where every corner hid an enemy and every building was a fortress. The humans fought like nothing the Valorians had ever seen. They used the terrain perfectly. They appeared, fired, and vanished before the soldiers could react. They worked in small teams, covering each other, communicating without words. They knew every street, every alley, every hiding spot. 6 hours after the landing, Zorvax received his first ground report. Of 50,000 soldiers deployed, contact had been lost with 42,000. The survivors were trapped in small pockets, surrounded and under constant attack. They were begging for extraction. Zorvax read the report 3 times, certain there had been a mistake. There had to be a mistake. This was impossible, but the numbers did not change. He walked to the viewport and looked down at the blue and green planet below. It looked so peaceful from up here, so small, so harmless. Somewhere on the surface, his soldiers were dying. And the humans were not just fighting them, they were hunting them. Zorvax finally understood what Keth Vorn had tried to tell him. But understanding had come too late. The invasion had begun, and there was no turning back now. The war would continue, and it would be nothing like what the Empire had expected. 3 months into the war, the Valorian Empire sent reinforcements. 2,000 more ships. 10 million more soldiers. They established orbital control over Earth and began bombardment campaigns. Cities burned. Millions of humans died under the fire from space dot, and still, the humans fought. The Valorian High Command could not understand it. They had destroyed the humans' largest cities. They had killed millions of their people. They controlled the space above their planet. By every rule of warfare the Empire knew, the humans should have surrendered. Instead, they fought harder. Intelligence officers began collecting reports from the front lines. What they found disturbed them deeply. These reports were shared only among the highest ranks, because the information was too frightening for common soldiers to know. The first report concerned human biology. Valorian scientists had captured and studied human prisoners. What they discovered seemed impossible. When a human was injured or in danger, their body released chemicals that suppressed pain and increased strength. They called it adrenaline. It allowed wounded humans to continue fighting long after they should have collapsed. A human with a hole in their chest could keep shooting for minutes. A human with a missing limb could still run, still fight, still kill. No other species in the Empire had this ability. Most beings were immediately disabled by serious injury. Their bodies protected them by forcing them to stop. But humans had evolved on a death world where stopping meant dying. Their bodies had learned to push through damage that would kill anything else. The second report concerned human psychology. When captured, humans revealed nothing. Every interrogation technique failed. Chemical treatments made them sick but did not break their will. Telepathic probes were somehow blocked by their primitive minds. They seemed to have a mental wall that protected their secrets. Some of them died during interrogation, still refusing to speak. Others laughed at their captors. One human soldier had looked at his Valorian interrogator and said, "You have no idea what you are dealing with." The interrogator had laughed at the time. He did not laugh anymore. The third report concerned human coordination. Valorian soldiers relied on telepathic links and hive mind connections to coordinate in battle. It was clean and efficient. Thoughts passed between soldiers at the speed of light. Humans had no such ability. Their minds were isolated, alone, unable to touch each other. And yet, they moved in perfect tactical unity. They covered each other without needing to communicate. They anticipated each other's moves without any visible signal. When asked how this was possible, a captured human had shrugged and said one word: training. The Valorians did not understand. How could training replace telepathy? How could practice match the speed of thought? But the evidence was clear. Human soldiers trusted each other completely. That trust, built through years of shared hardship, was stronger than any mental link. The fourth report was the worst of all. A Valorian research vessel had captured a human-computer database. Scientists spent weeks decoding the strange symbols and learning the human language. What they found changed everything. They found human history. They read about a battle called Thermopylae, where 300 warriors had held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They read about a city called Stalingrad, where humans had fought each other with such brutality that the Valorians had no equivalent. Millions had died in the frozen ruins. Neither side had surrendered. They read about guerrilla wars that lasted decades, about soldiers who lived in underground tunnels for years, surviving on nothing but hatred and determination, about prisoners of war who survived torture and starvation through pure spite. They read about humans charging into certain death rather than retreating, about pilots crashing their own planes into enemy ships, about soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save their companions. The scientists compiled their findings into a single conclusion. Humans had been at war since before they discovered fire. They had never known peace. They had spent their entire existence fighting, first against their planet, then against each other, and now against the stars. War was not something humans did. War was what they were, but the most terrifying discovery was still to come. 3 months after the invasion began, Valorian scouts detected something impossible. Human ships were appearing in new locations, ships that had not existed before. When captured, these ships revealed the truth. The humans had reverse-engineered Valorian technology. They had taken the shields from destroyed ships and figured out how they worked. They had studied captured weapons and built copies. They had cracked the basics of faster-than-light travel from salvaged navigation computers. In 3 months, they had made technological jumps that should have taken centuries. They were not just surviving. They were learning. They were adapting. And they were getting stronger. Back on the Valorian homeworld, Keth Vorn watched the war reports with a mixture of grim satisfaction and growing horror. He had warned the Senate. He had told them what would happen. But even he had not understood the full truth. The Senate summoned him again. This time, there was no laughter. The chamber was quiet. The senators who had dismissed him as mad now looked at him with fear in their eyes. "You were right," Senator Thamira admitted. Her voice was hollow. "Everything you said was right." Keth Vorn did not enjoy being proven correct. There was no satisfaction in this. Only dread. How do we stop them? High Admiral Zorvax asked. His golden uniform was wrinkled. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. He was no longer the confident commander who had laughed at warnings. "Tell us how to defeat them." Keth Vorn looked at the tactical displays covering the walls. He saw the casualty figures. He saw the lost ships and dead soldiers. He saw the human fleet growing larger every day. "You do not stop them," he said quietly. "You cannot defeat them. They are not like other species. They do not fight because they want something. They fight because something tried to take what was theirs. They will not stop until they have won or until every last one of them is dead." "There must be something we can do," Ithmira pleaded. Keth Vorn turned to face her. His empty eye sockets seemed to stare through her. "Pray," he said. "Pray that they choose to stop themselves. because nothing else in this galaxy can stop them for you. The chamber fell silent. Outside, in the shipyards, construction continued on new warships. But everyone in the room knew the truth. The Empire had awakened something it could not control. And now the galaxy would pay the price. 8 months after the invasion began, the first human faster-than-light ship left the Sol system. It was an ugly thing, built from salvaged alien technology and human determination. The hull was patched with different metals. The engines flickered with unstable power. The design violated every rule of spacecraft engineering, but it worked. The humans called it the Defiance. And it was only the beginning. Within a week, there were 10 more ships. Within a month, there were 100. The humans were not building a fleet. They were building an armada. Their shipyards worked around the clock. Workers slept in shifts and volunteered for double duty. Every factory on Earth had been converted to war production. Every scientist worked on weapons. Every engineer designed new ships. The Valorians had expected the humans to hide on their planet and wait for death. Instead, the humans came for them. The first human warships appeared in Valorian territory without warning. They did not attack military bases or capital worlds. They were smarter than that. They hit supply lines first. Fuel depots, communication relays, food convoys. They cut the arteries that kept the Empire alive. The Valorian fleet tried to chase them, but the humans were too fast and too clever. They would appear in a system, destroy everything valuable, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. They fought the way they had always fought on their own world. Not with honor, not with glory, with effectiveness. Then came the broadcast. Human ships began transmitting messages directly to Valorian soldiers. The messages were simple and terrifying. We know your names. We know where your families live. Surrender and you will be treated fairly. Fight and we will find you. Not today, not tomorrow, but we will find you. Many Valorian officers laughed at these threats. They believed it was a bluff. Psychological warfare and nothing more. Then human special forces teams began appearing in impossible places. A Valorian general was found dead in his own bedroom on a heavily guarded military station. A knife was pinned through his chest, holding a note in place. The note had 3 words: next time, higher. A week later, the Empire's Minister of War was assassinated in his own office. The human team that killed him left no trace. No one knew how they got in or how they escaped. Fear spread through the Valorian military. Officers stopped sleeping. Guards were tripled at every installation. But the humans kept coming. They moved like ghosts. They killed like shadows. And they left messages with every body. We are coming for all of you. The Valorian public, who had been promised a quick and easy conquest, watched in horror as the war came home. News reports showed human ships in Valorian space. Propaganda broadcasts were replaced with human transmissions. The invincible Empire was bleeding, and everyone could see it. But the humans did something unexpected. They did not just attack the Valorians. They freed the other species. For thousands of years, the Empire had conquered and enslaved countless races. The Krellians worked in the mines. The Silthani served in the households. The Mothric built the ships. They had been told that resistance was impossible. They had been told that the Empire would rule forever. Now they watched humans landing on their worlds, not as conquerors, but as liberators. The humans gave them weapons. The humans taught them to fight. The humans told them that the Empire could be defeated, and the slave species began to rise. Rebellions erupted across the Empire. Planets that had been quiet for centuries suddenly exploded into violence. The Valorian military, already stretched thin fighting the humans, now had to deal with enemies on all sides. The Empire began to fracture. High Admiral, Zorvax watched his territory shrink every day. His proud fleet had been reduced to 1,200 ships. His soldiers were exhausted and demoralized. Desertion had become epidemic. Soldiers whispered that the humans could not be killed, that they were demons from beyond the stars. Zorvax knew he had to do something dramatic. He had to win a decisive victory or watch everything he had built collapse. He gathered his remaining forces for one final massive assault on Earth. Every ship, every soldier, weapons of planetary destruction. He would burn the human homeworld to ash and end this nightmare forever. The fleet jumped to the Sol system. 1,200 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, weapons charged and ready. The humans were waiting for them. Zorvax looked at his tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. The human fleet had grown while he was gathering his forces. They had 3,000 ships now, arranged in perfect formation. They had learned Valorian tactics by studying captured officers. They had improved Valorian technology by adding their own innovations, and they were not afraid. The battle lasted 9 hours. It was the largest engagement in galactic history. Energy beams crossed the void. Ships exploded like tiny stars. Debris filled the space between Earth and its moon. The Valorians fought with desperation. The humans fought with precision. Every tactic Zorvax tried, the humans had a counter. Every trap he set, the humans avoided. They moved like a single organism, thousands of ships acting with perfect coordination. When the battle ended, Zorvax's flagship drifted dead in space. Human marines had boarded it, fighting through every deck. They had captured him alive. He was the first Valorian admiral in history to be taken prisoner. The humans did not execute him. They did not torture him. Instead, they put him on trial. The proceedings were broadcast across the entire galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the evidence was presented. The invasion plans, the bombardment orders, the cities burned and the civilians killed. Zorvax was found guilty of war crimes. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The message was clear to everyone watching. The humans were not savages. They were not monsters. They had laws. They had principles. They had captured their greatest enemy and given him a fair trial. And they were still coming. Back on the Valorian homeworld, the Emperor watched the trial broadcast with growing despair. His military was shattered. His empire was crumbling. Species that had been loyal for millennia were now turning against him. He had only one option left. He would have to negotiate with the humans. But as he prepared his request for a meeting, one thought kept echoing in his mind. The same thought that had haunted Kethvorin for over a year now. They had been warned. And they had not listened. Now the price would be paid. 2 years after the invasion began, human ships hung in orbit above Valoria Prime. They did not fire. They did not bombard. They simply waited. The great Valorian Empire, which had ruled 40,000 star systems for 8,000 years, had been reduced to barely 3,000 worlds. The rest had either declared independence or joined the growing Terran alliance. Former slave species now flew their own ships and governed their own planets. The galaxy had changed forever. Emperor Zixthorian the Eternal stood in his throne room and looked up at the tactical display. The human fleet filled the screen. Thousands of ships, each one a reminder of his failure. His ancestors had conquered species that breathed plasma and beings made of living crystal. They had absorbed hive minds that spanned entire planets, and they had all been defeated by soft, short-lived mammals from a small blue world. The Emperor sent his request for a meeting. The humans accepted. Their delegation arrived the next day. It was led by Admiral Sarah Chun, the same woman who had delivered the first warning 2 years ago. She walked into the Imperial Palace with an escort of 12 Marines. Their armor was scarred and dented, marked by battles across 100 worlds. They had fought their way across the galaxy, and their eyes showed that they remembered every moment. The Emperor rose from his throne as Chun approached. He tried to maintain his dignity. He was still the Emperor. He still represented the oldest power in the galaxy. "I am prepared to discuss terms," he said. "A ceasefire. Territorial adjustments. Reparations, if necessary. I am certain we can find a solution that benefits both our peoples." Chun stopped a few meters from the throne. She did not bow. She did not show any sign of respect. She simply looked at him with those cold, steady eyes. "There will be no discussion," she said. "There will be no negotiation." She held out a small device. The Emperor's aide took it and projected its contents into the air. It was a document. Simple and direct. Unconditional. Surrender. War crimes tribunals for military. Commanders. Immediate. Liberation of all enslaved species. Complete. Dismantling of the Empire's military forces. The Emperor read the terms in silence. His hands trembled slightly. This was not a peace treaty. This was a death sentence for everything his dynasty had built. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. Chun smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator that had caught its prey. "Then we continue," she said. "We have time. We have patience. And we have a very, very long memory. We will take your worlds one by one. We will free your slaves one by one. We will destroy your fleet ship by ship. And when we are finished, there will be nothing left of your empire except stories to frighten children." The throne room was silent. "You invaded our home," Chung continued. Her voice was quiet but filled with ice. "You burned our cities. You killed our children. You thought we were weak because we were small. You thought we would break because we were young. You were wrong." The Emperor looked at the document again. He looked at the human Marines, standing motionless behind their admiral. He looked at the tactical display, where his remaining fleet was surrounded by forces that could destroy them in hours. He had no choice. "I accept your terms," he said. The surrender ceremony took place 3 days later. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched as the Emperor signed the documents that ended his dynasty. Valorian soldiers laid down their weapons. Ships lowered their shields. The war was over. Kethvorm watched the ceremony from the crowd. He stood among ordinary Valorians, most of them weeping as they watched their Emperor kneel before a human. He did not weep. He had spent too long waiting for this moment. A human soldier approached him. She was young, perhaps mid-20s by human standards. She had the look of a veteran, with scars on her hands and that particular steadiness in her eyes. "You are Commander Kethvorn," she said. It was not a question. He nodded. "I was a commander once. Now I am nothing." The soldier looked at his prosthetic limbs, his scarred face, his empty eye socket. "We found the records of your testimony," she said. "The Kelzari border incident. You tried to warn them, for all the good it did." The soldier was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again. "That colony ship you found. Those were refugees from the Eastern European conflicts. They had already lost everything once. Their homes, their countries, their families. When your fleet came for them, they had nothing left to lose." Kethvorn understood then. Finally, completely, he understood. The humans were not terrifying because they were strong. They were terrifying because they had already known suffering. The universe's cruelty was nothing new to them. They had been forging themselves in fire since before they left their caves. Every war, every famine, every disaster had made them harder. The Valorian Empire had made a fatal mistake. It had attacked a species that was born from struggle. It had threatened a people who defined themselves by what they had survived. "What happens now?" Kethvorn asked. "Now we rebuild," the soldier said. All of us, together. And they did. The Terran Alliance became the dominant power in the galaxy. But unlike the Empire, it did not rule through fear. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were freed. Worlds that had been strip-mined were restored. The humans shared their technology, their knowledge, their terrible gift for survival. They could have become the new tyrants. They chose differently. When asked why, Admiral Chun gave an answer that echoed across the stars. Because we know what it is like to be the underdog. We know what it is like to fight against impossible odds. We did not survive this long just to become what we destroyed. Years passed. Keth Voren became an advisor to the Terran-Valorian Reconciliation Council. He traveled to Earth for the first time, walking on the soil of the planet his people had tried to burn. He stood in a park built over the ashes of war and watched human children playing in the afternoon sun. Their laughter filled the air. They had no memory of the bombardments, the invasions, the battles that had shaped their future. A human colleague joined him, a veteran of the same war, missing an arm. They stood together in comfortable silence. "What do you think of us now?" the human asked finally. Keth Voren considered the question for a long time. He thought about everything he had seen. The violence and the mercy. The fury and the forgiveness. The capacity for both destruction and creation that seemed to define this strange species. "I think," he said slowly, "that the galaxy is very fortunate you chose to be builders instead of destroyers." The human laughed. "Do not give us too much credit. We are still figuring it out." Keth Voren watched the children again. A species that had been burned and invaded and underestimated. A species that had clawed its way to the stars through sheer refusal to die. A species that had been given every reason to become monsters and had chosen to become something else. "I think you always were," he said quietly. And somewhere, across the galaxy, on a planet that had not yet discovered faster than light travel, a young species looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. In 100 years, they would meet the humans too. They would be warned. Whether they listened was up to them.